When you are creating a blueprint, you will have to choose which parent class to pick. You can think of parent classes like templates that will provide you with different options, depending on what class you choose. Your interface might be different. Classes that are displayed on buttons are known as common classes, and to use another parent class, click on All Classes and expand Object if it's closed. On the internet, I found this graph which shows the inheritance of common classes. Here it says that inheritance allows a class to inherit properties and methods from another class, so it's important to understand that classes inherit characteristics of the class above them. On Common Classes tab, first we have Actor. As you saw with our cubes, Actor is an object that can be placed or spawned in the world. On our inheritance graph, we can see that Pawn is a child class of Actor. And if we read here at Common Classes, Pawn is an actor that can be possessed and receive input from controller. If you create a pawn class and open it in your details panel, you can see we have some new options for controlling the pawn. So pawn class extends the actor class by this here movement options. Here we have options for pawn to be controlled by a player, by an AI, and also AI controller. In your top right corner, you can see what is the parent class of this blueprint. Go and open menu for picking a parent class. On our inheritance graph, we can see that character class is a child class of the pawn class, so our character class can also be possessed by a controller, just like pawn. We can see here that character is a type of pawn that includes the ability to walk around. You could also say that character class is type actor because it extends from pawn, and pawn is also type actor. You can create character blueprint and open it. You can see that new components have been added like capsule component, arrow, mesh, and character movement. And you also have some new options in details panel like character movement, walking, jumping, swimming, flying, and so on. And if you look in your pawn blueprint, more than half of them are missing, so you can conclude that character class extends pawn class by components and more detailed movement options for characters. So if we look at our inheritance graph, remember that characters are pawns, and pawns are actors. Everything you want to place or spawn in your level has to be of type actor. Pawn extends actor class, with greater focus on moving. Use a pawn when you need an object that can move but doesn't require advanced humanoid features. Character extends pawn with even greater focus on movement. Use a character when you need a humanoid entity with advanced movement capabilities. If we go to our project settings, click on Maps and Modes, and expand selected game mode, and look for default pawn class. Here we can see that we are using BP third-person character as our default pawn class. So, when we start the game, we will start as that character. If we wanted to start as a new character, this is the place where we would change that. If you click on this folder icon, it will automatically locate that blueprint in your content browser. You can just open it up. In your top right corner, you can see that it says Parent Class Character. If we look at the graph, we can see the controller has two children controllers. Player controller is used by human players, and AI controller uses AI to control the pawn or the character. Player controller is an actor that is responsible for controlling a pawn used by the player. You can use it to program functions that will be shared among other characters that you plan to use in your game, like pause menu, inventory, map, character movement like sprinting, jumping, and things like attacking if all your characters can attack. Things that all your characters will share, and some specific things that you want for your characters should exist in your character or pawn blueprint. If we create player controller and name it BP_player controller, and if we go in our project settings and game mode, here we can change our player controller class. You can just click on it and select BP player controller. Now we told our project to use that player controller. If you click play, everything is normal. Now let's say I want my mouse to be visible to the player. Open your BP player controller, and to see our mouse, we can check this box Show Mouse Cursor. Compile blueprint and click play. Now when we play, we can see our mouse. If we duplicate our BP third-person character and name it BP_character, we can open it up, Click on Mesh and change character's color to something random and drop it into the level. Now that colors have been changed, I will just drop it into the level. Now if we open Player Controller Blueprint, we can make so that when we click 1 or 2 on our keyboard, we will swap between our two characters. To do that, we have to open Event Graph and search for Event Begin Play node. We can add Sequence node if we want to. Now we can search for Get All Actors of Class node. We can expand on our actor class and look for BP character and select it. We can then click on our out actors and move the line to an empty space and look for Get a Copy node. We can then right-click on an output pin and select Promote to Variable and rename it to Character 1. We can then copy and paste nodes. Delete Set Character node, and in our actor class change it to BP Third Person Character. Promote Get node to a variable and rename it to Character 2. What we are doing here at the beginning of play, we are getting all actors of class that we specified in our actor class. Because we only have one, so we have one BP character and one BP third-person character, we can use Get node to get that character and then promote it to a variable to store that character. Now we can search for keyboard event 1. Drag from Pressed and type Possess. Connect character 1 to In Pawn. Now do the same for keyboard event 2, but connect character 2. Now compile. If you get an error like me, right-click on the node and click Refresh Nodes. Delete Set Character 2 node and promote Get node to a variable. I'm just deleting old character 2 variable so that I can rename new variable to character 2. I will drag it to the graph and get it. I will connect that character 2 variable to Possess function. Now if we play our game and press 1 and 2 on our keyboard, we can swap between two characters that we have in our game. As you see, we can see mouse on both characters, and we can also change characters. That is possible because we scripted it that way in our player controller, so we are sharing those functionalities with both characters. Game mode is place where you define rules of the game. Functionality like how points are awarded and tracked during the game, set rules like victory conditions, respawn mechanics and stuff like that. We can create one and rename it to BP_game mode base. If we change it to BP Game Mode Base, you'll notice that the default pawn class and player controller are updated as well. A game mode determines which default classes, like the pawn and player controller, will be used in your game. If we change it to BP Game Mode Base, you'll notice that the default pawn class and player controller are updated as well. A game mode determines which default classes, like the pawn and player controller, will be used in your game. If we open our Game Mode Base blueprint and look into our Details panel, we can see tab called Classes. Here we can change some of them, but that will also change them in our project settings. So you are changing the same thing. Just remember to change default game mode in your project settings to be the same you're currently editing. If you want to see changes in your project settings, in your BP Game Mode Base, change default pawn class to be BP character, and change your default game mode back to BP third-person game mode. Each level can have different game mode, and game mode of a level overrides default game mode of the project. So if we put default game mode to be third-person game mode and click play, you can remember that in our player controller we made mouse visible, and you can see it in the game. And this game mode is using player controller where we made that possible. Now in your level editor, click Settings button and choose World Settings. You can see a tab called Game Mode, and here we can change game mode of the level. If we change it to BP Game Mode Base and click play, we should play as another character, and we won't be able to see our mouse. As you can see, something is not working. Let's open our BP Game Mode Base that we just created, and as you can see, I didn't change default pawn, so when I play, I don't have character. So just change it to BP character. And now when we play as different character, and we can't see our mouse. But in our project settings, we have a different default game mode, so you can see that game mode of a level will override default game mode. You can change your level game mode back to default. As you just saw, game mode we created had a different character and different player controller options. That's why we played as different character, and we didn't see our mouse. We also have actor component and scene component. You can create actor component and call it actor component, and you can create scene component and call it scene component. Now open your BP third-person character blueprint. If you go to your components panel and click Add, you can search for scene component and actor component and add them in. You can see your scene component was added to the top part of your components panel, and your actor component was added to the bottom part of your components panel. These classes are used to create components that can be added to your actors. So a scene component is a component that can be attached to other scene component and has transform values. Actor component can't be attached to your scene components and doesn't have transform values. When you need to attach components that require location-based behaviors, for instance, if you want to attach a camera to a character, you would use a scene component. When you need to add behaviors or functionalities that are not tied to a specific location in the world, for example, adding a health component to a character, you would use actor component. And we have one more parent class that is not common, but it's important. It's called game instance. You can search for it here. And if you go to your project settings, maps and modes, and look for game instance, you will find a place where you can change your game instance. It's important to understand that all actors and objects in your level are destroyed and respawned each time you load a level. So its purpose is to manage data that should persist between levels or during the entire game session. Manage save, load functionality by keeping track of the game state and player progress. Basically to save data that you don't want to reset, store variables that need to be accessed by multiple levels. Actor is an object that can be placed in the world. Pawn is an actor that can be moved around. Character is a type of pawn with more advanced movement capability. Player controller is controlled by you, the player, and is responsible for controlling the character. You can use it to program functions that will be shared among other characters. As you saw with the mouse example, we were able to see our mouse on both of our characters. Game mode is the place where you can define rules of the game. How points are awarded to player, victory conditions, stuff like that. It can also impact other classes. As you saw when we changed it, some of the classes were changed. Actor component is a class that can be added to your actors. Use it when you need to attach components like health, stamina, and stuff like that. Scene component is a class that also can be added to your actors. Use it when you need to attach components that need transform values like camera. And game instance is used to program files that you want to save.